Good morning. Hello. That was a weird way to say good morning, like a creeper. I'm like a little, when like sometimes you're tired and it's like a tired hangover, that is just one of those days today. So I sound a little bit sleepier than normal, but I am going live for our regular live at 9 on Fridays. I didn't announce it, so I was hoping that you guys are like, she goes live every Friday at 9 regardless. I almost did it and I was like, I'm so tired, you guys, but I'm like, I'm gonna hang in there. I've been pulling like long ass days, let's just say that, to get fully nourished out. So just hang in there with me, you guys. Hang in there. I'm a hot mess these days. But I am so happy that you're here. Thank you. I will not forget to repost everything onto YouTube. I thought I would just go live today so that I can go and like post everything from last week. I'll do last Wednesdays, last Fridays, and then I went live yesterday and on Wednesday. So there's going to be 5 lives up on YouTube by probably tonight. After today, I'm going to... after today, I'm gonna go upload all of those. I haven't been uploading any lives past April yet because they take like forever to download, and I wanted all my latest lives to be uploaded before I go and like upload my earlier lives. And on top of that, some of my earlier lives, they're not like... Some of the stuff I no longer believe, or it's no longer, I've like transitioned and evolved as a nutritionist, and so over time, and so some of the lives I've just kind of omitted because I'm like, there's not as current information in there, and so I don't want to confuse you guys. I have a lot of people that are looking at my older stuff and being very confused about what I teach now, and it's just because like as a nutritionist, I've learned, I've changed, I've really transitioned over to metabolic healing because I understand that that's what it really takes to heal your hormones, not because I used to kind of follow like conventional hormone advice, even like conventional functional. I always say like there's a lot of themes going on in the functional medicine and health and wellness field that are just baloney. So I just do not want to just like regurgitate advice for you guys. I'm always learning, always changing, always evolving, and so I try to do that in a way that like I don't confuse the hell out of you. So I hope you guys understand. But Melina says, have you found that repeat is the ultimate answer? No one is ever the ultimate answer, you guys. I always learn from different people, and I do find that his work combined with some other people do answer a lot of questions when it comes to all of these hormonal issues, that it has a lot to do with metabolism from a very young age and how your metabolism breaks down over time. It explains PCOS, it explains even sometimes cancer, and it also explains, he talks a lot about how, thyroid breakdown is what initially is going to actually cause you to have low immunity and eventually develop autoimmune disease. And so for me, his work has really tied all my knowledge and been like, oh, like it finally connected all the dots that I had been learning over 8 years. But it had also made me think like, oh shoot, like I'm eating in a way that is anti-metabolic. I'm eating 2 times a day, I'm intermittent fasting, I'm eating like in a keto style of eating. And so, when I discovered his work, I obviously didn't just say like, oh, this is the answer. Like I really started to study it and I really started to implement like little things. And then I was like, wow, like, whoa, this feels really good. Like I feel great. And then it just kind of evolves from there. But I don't just follow, like, people are like, you talk about a lot about Ray Peat's principles, and I'm like, yeah, I think like his stuff is great, but there's like other people and other research that I do. It's not just like, if you're ever like a follower of one person and you think that their word is Bible, you've kind of lost the point of science and nutrition. Science is art, and people don't realize that. They think that science and art are different, and it's like, no, you have to, over time, you're curating this big art piece. You're learning about the ins and outs of the body and the inner workings, and you should never stop learning. You should never stop intertwining those puzzle pieces and bringing more understanding to yourself. But not to make this like a philosophical thing, but I'm just saying that I don't think that anyone is the answer, but I definitely do not believe in this like new age, like intermittent fasting, all these like low carb diets. Like those are a process of metabolic stress. What we have to understand is that our ancestors were forced to go into ketosis when it was wintertime, when fruits and honey were no longer available, and the only thing that was available was, your stored plant foods like rooty vegetables and tubers and meats and fats. And so when the days became shorter and there was less sun, the body had to conserve fuel. And so there wasn't a lot of carbohydrates available, not a lot of glucose available. And so the body decided that it was going to make another source of fuel called ketones, or go into ketosis. This was a process of metabolic stress, of famine, meaning that our body had to go into a kind of a hibernative-like state in order to conserve energy during the winter months because food was scarce. Just because something is natural does not mean it is optimal. And our ancestors didn't live in a stressful environment. They weren't exposed to Wi-Fi, EMFs, pollution in the air, water, and food, antibiotics, and all these antibiotic-resistant bacteria. And their only literal goal in life was to survive, eat, sleep, poop, reproduce. That's all they had to do. They didn't have stressful jobs. They didn't have to pay taxes. They didn't have to raise children on their own without a community. They had a tribe. They had, they were spiritual. And so now we have this idea that eating like your ancestors is a good idea. And I'm like, why? You did not live like your ancestors. Like, why would you eat like them? That's ridiculous to me. You need to eat in a biologically accurate way. And you needed to eat in a way that reflects your environment. And what is your environment? You live in a stressful AF environment. Your body is exposed to stress at every moment of every day in the environment we live in. And that's just the world that we live in. We have to acknowledge that. And so if you're going to add more stress by putting your body into ketosis, or more stress by not eating, and your liver's burning through glucose so quickly because it's trying to metabolize just all the toxins we're exposed to, good luck. Good luck. And you're going to see your body slowly disintegrate over time, and everything's going to be kind of slow. And digestion's going to be slow, and mood's going to be slow, and everything's slow because really you're in that kind of like hibernative type state. So I don't think that lower carb ends up healing anybody. I think it just ends up metabolically suppressing you more so that you can't tolerate carbs in the future. It's catering to a broken metabolism. You're catering to a metabolism that's already burning free fatty acids. That is a break in the metabolism. That's not like, oh, let's just let our body continue to burn free fatty acids and force it to. It means like, why is my body burning free fatty acids? It's from inflammation stemming from the gut. Insulin resistance almost always comes from inflammation stemming from the gut, because lipopolysaccharides, or toxins coming from the gut, are supposed to be metabolized by the liver. But wait, the liver's overburdened. So what happens? Those go into general circulation and stress out your cells. And when your cells are inflamed, they cannot respond to insulin properly. They cannot burn glucose properly. Another reason you're insulin resistant is because you have low T3. Your body needs T3 to be able to burn glucose properly. Oh, and wait, there's more. Your body needs progesterone to burn glucose properly. The three things that are always happening with PCOS is usually low T3, low progesterone from not ovulating because of stress, and gut issues. And you know what? Usually restricting your carbohydrates make two of those issues worse, the low T3 and the progesterone issue. The only benefit that comes from intermittent fasting and ketosis is that you're starving bacteria. You're giving the digestive system a break. And so in that process, you're not, those endotoxins or those lipopolysaccharides that are inflaming your cells are not being produced. But when you go back to eating carbs, nothing's changed. You just put a Band-Aid on the situation. So it's time to really kill those bacteria. Fully nourished, can you follow if you're preggo? Yeah, of course. I just want you to make sure like you're eating plenty, but yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think if there's anything in there that would be contraindicated. No, No, I actually am going to like recommend it as a pre-pregnancy program as well. I think it's like going to be a great fertility prep. There's a few things that you do need to make sure that you're getting when you're pregnant though. Remember you guys, folate, 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 not folic acid, folate. So when you are growing a little human, the neural tubes and neural pathways of that child require lots of folate, because folate is needed for cellular cellular separating or cellular regeneration. Like the cells are growing, they're separating, and they're becoming new cells. Folate is needed for that process. And so we need to make sure that you have tons of folate. So I actually recommend like 800 to 1200 micrograms 6 months before you even think about conceiving. Like you guys need to make sure. We live in a very stressful environment where we are very depleted in nutrients. If you're thinking about pregnancy in the near future, you need to start prepping your body 3 to 6 months in advance. Don't even think about conceiving until you've prepped your body with the right nutrients, or your baby is going to be the one that suffers. And I'm sorry, like I know women are like, I want a baby and I want it now. And I'm like, you need to make sure your baby doesn't end up suffering for your impatience. And I know that's like a little tough lovey, but you will end up being thankful. And then you also need to make sure that if you're going to get pregnant, your T3 levels are optimal, because low T3 in you means low T3 in your baby, and then your baby is born with lots of allergies and has a slow metabolism, is slow to grow, that kind of thing. So you have to make sure that your health is optimal before you go and conceive. And this is where, people are like, well, wait, what about fertility treatments? And I always say, if you have to force the body to become pregnant, that you're directly interfering with the body's wisdom. Usually the body is not allowing you to become pregnant for your protection and for baby's protection. And you have to look at it in a different way. And so just make sure you're prepped before you go and try to conceive. And then, when you are pregnant, you will need to make sure you're getting 600 to 800 micrograms of folate per day, I would say pretty regularly. We are thinking of doing Clomid again next year, so I want to prepare my body. Awesome. That is what I would do. Just like I was just saying, just make sure you're prepping your body, you're making sure you're eating well, and really, insulin resistance is stemming from stress, and I really recommend, if you're insulin resistant, to really be very conscious of the fats you are consuming. I say this all of the time. If you are consuming high amounts of polyunsaturated fats, including lots of nuts, now I'm not saying nuts are bad, but too many nuts, and you're not getting enough saturated fats, you're gonna have a very hard time processing glucose, because the fats that you consume completely determine how your body's gonna process the sugar you consume. So it is important to eat carbohydrates, but it's also important to eat to understand that what you eat with those carbohydrates is what matters. It's going to completely determine how you process the carbohydrates. So if you're like, my body's having a hard time processing carbohydrates, what's going on? What are you eating with those carbs? Are you eating tons and tons of plant fats and not enough saturated fats? Are you not eating enough protein, over 100 grams per day from bioavailable sources? What's going on? And then sometimes women don't even realize that they've been under eating their whole lives, meaning that their body is physiologically insulin resistant, meaning that the body has actually decided that the only way it's going to be able to hold on and store fat for later, because it's afraid of a famine, is to resist insulin. It actually is doing it as a protective mechanism. And so the only true way to overcome insulin resistance is to make sure your gut is healthy, to make sure you're consuming the right kinds of fats, enough protein, and the right carbohydrate sources, and then to make sure that you have enough T3, enough progesterone, and usually that takes care of insulin resistance. You also need to make sure your stress hormones are low, you're lowering stress. And remember, not eating or eating very infrequently raises your stress hormones. Would you say now that your current lifestyle, you feel the best you've ever felt? I wouldn't, honestly, I'll be honest with you guys, I'm very stressed out right now. I have lots of stress. This business is like eating me right now, alive, which is just kind of the season of life I'm in. This is not a forever thing. I'm hustling really hard right now so that I don't have to hustle as hard later. I want to put people in the right positions, hire people, and I have to hustle right now so I can do that in the future. So right now I am a lot more stressed than normal. I'm not exercising as much as I normally normally do. I'm not sleeping as much as I normally do. So those factors are definitely making me not feel my best. However, if I was still on keto, I feel like I would be dead. I feel like if I was still on a low carb diet, I would literally, this job or having this business might have made me crack. Like, the only way I'm being so resilient to stress right now is because I'm consuming enough food, and I'm eating sugar, and I'm eating, I'm just giving my body the fuel that it needs. And so I could say that I feel pretty dang good for the amount of stress that I'm under and the amount of like not being super great about my other habits. Like, I haven't been sleeping enough, probably only 7 hours, where I really like 9 to 10. And then, I really like to exercise every day, whether that's like yoga or weightlifting. Those are my two favorites, and I feel really good doing that. And when I don't, I just kind of feel like not my best. And so I still feel pretty good for the amount of stress I'm under, and to say that is a lot. So I would say that it's getting there for sure. I wish I would have discovered metabolic healing or eating for my metabolism a lot sooner than just over, like, I would say I discovered this like over a year ago, but I didn't really like apply it or really like I studied it, but I didn't apply it until about like 6 months ago. And so it really has definitely changed things. Is it possible for metformin to damage our ovaries? I was only on it for 2 months last year, and ever since my right ovary feels like it's going to burst every time I'm on my period. Girl, I think that, metformin can increase the amount of lactic acid in the cell. And so that is like a negative side effect of metformin, which is lactic acid is cellular poison pretty much. So some people have a lot of lactic acid already, and then like taking metformin can increase that amount of lactic acid and cause some serious issues. So that's really interesting. I would say like up until ovulation, I would really I just want to say, okay, every time you're on your period. Okay, so when you're on your period and estrogen is really high that week before, that luteal phase, remember that estrogen is inflammatory to the reproductive organs. It's inflammatory. And so when you don't have enough progesterone to balance it out, or you're not detoxifying estrogens really well, during your period, you can feel symptoms of estrogen dominance. Very many times that's like clots, cramps, heavy bleeding, PMS, headaches, like just feeling like angry, like you want to rip everyone's head off, that kind of thing. But some people, remember that estrogen dominance can also cause ovarian cysts or just like swelling of the ovaries, like kind of similarly to what you have. I would like consider like maybe going and getting an ultrasound when you're on your period to see if you actually have a cyst during that time. If that's the case, then you might have a lot of estrogen floating around. And so during your luteal phase, it's your responsibility to really focus on estrogen detox, okay? So you want to make sure, like, I would consider doing like some castor oil packs during that phase. Remember, they're not really great to do while you're bleeding. They say they're contraindicated. They can just make you bleed harder, so you don't want to do that. But the week before your period, it can be really helpful to do some castor oil packs, drink some chlorophyll in your water, just do like my basic detox strategies that are laid out in my liver detox guide on my website. And then really work on that. Like that week leading up to your period, it's your job. Like, I'm going to really focus on estrogen detox and see if that happens. Because sometimes like metformin can deplete you of certain nutrients that are going to help you detoxify. And so I'm thinking that maybe like it messed with your detoxification more than, and then like it's causing some estrogen issues rather than like the metformin itself damaged your ovaries. More like the estrogen's bothering your ovaries and the metformin might have like caused issues with you detoxifying it properly. Plus, metformin also like really messes with your gut bacteria balance. And so sometimes it can actually like increase the amount of bacteria that reactivate estrogens in the gut and allow them to get reabsorbed by the body. All in all, it's very different for everyone. Like metformin, I've seen like a huge range. Like I've seen people that like literally say like that medication is the devil. Whereas like I kind of felt that way. Like I felt awful on it. when I took it years ago. But then there's like people that are like, this is the best thing that ever happened to me. Like, I love this medication. So for me, it's like metformin has such a range, and I think it's just so dependent on the person. Hey Jess, my GP told me to do intermittent fasting for my PCOS, but would you say that's not a good idea then? Thanks. Yeah, so a lot of, the problem with a lot of GPs is, remember, they don't really study nutrition, and they are, they're hard at work doing their job. And so a lot of times they're pulling from their own experience. They're pulling from maybe the little research that they've done on certain things. Maybe they went to a seminar and someone gave a talk on intermittent fasting and they thought, wow, that's great. That sounds great. I'm going to start recommending it to my clients. But, remember, they're dealing with a wide variety of issues. They don't specialize in PCOS. They don't really sit there and just study how something's going to affect someone with PCOS. And see, PCOS is a very complex issue. It's a metabolic disorder. And you have to understand that the metabolic dysregulation started years before you got diagnosed, maybe even since you were born, and it led up to this diagnosis. A lot of people think that a diagnosis just comes out of nowhere, like, I just got diagnosed, like, it just was a shock to me. And I'm like, no, your body spoke to you in signs and symptoms probably for 10 years before you got diagnosed with PCOS, and so usually PCOS, because it's such a stress-driven condition, the worst thing you can do is add more stress by restricting food. A lot of times this metabolic dysregulation has occurred because the body hasn't had enough fuel consistently in the first place. And so what I find is women with PCOS, when they intermittent fast, they're really turning on their stress hormones, cortisol, adrenaline, and these can actually really mess with your blood sugar. They absolutely can help you lose weight, but see, doctors think that weight loss is a cure for PCOS. That is not the truth. Losing weight does not necessarily mean that your PCOS symptoms will go away. There are very lean women with PCOS. So that theory is out the window. So we have to understand that, yes, intermittent fasting might lead to weight loss, but is your body burning through fat under duress, meaning that stress hormones are high while you're doing it? That is not a metabolically stable place to be. And the minute that you go back to eating normally, your metabolism will probably be more damaged than when you started, not less. And so I highly recommend really focusing on nourishing yourself regularly and consistently and getting back to ovulating. Because remember, PCOS is not an ovarian problem, it's an ovulation problem. You have metabolic issues preventing you from dropping an egg or dropping an egg regularly. And your goal as a woman is to lower all of the stress in your body so that your body feels like it's safe to reproduce. It ovulates on a regular basis, creates that progesterone, because you only create progesterone when you ovulate, and then that will really mitigate a lot of the effects of estrogen and excess testosterone. And it also helps with blood sugar and burning glucose more efficiently. And then, as a woman with PCOS who cannot lose weight, you should always, and I mean always, be getting your thyroid labs done. Always. TSH, T4, T3, all day. If your doctor will not run them, go find a new doctor. Because if a doctor doesn't understand the correlation between thyroid issues and PCOS, they're dumb. They don't know about PCOS at all. And I don't mean that. I know that doctors are smart in a way, but they're taught to think a certain way, you guys. They're taught in a manner, and they're programmed to think that way over the course of all their education, which is very long, right? Diagnose, prescribe, treat. Diagnose, prescribe, treat. I do not go about things that way. I ask, why did it happen in the first place? Where's the root cause? How do we correct that root cause? Oh, symptoms gone. Did we heal ourselves? Whatever you want to call it. Did we reverse it? Whatever you want to call it. All I know is you're not struggling anymore. You know what I mean? Some people that promote veganism and keto say their diet does work if you're not calorie restricted, and that it's all about nutrient density. LO for veganism and calories. Well, for veganism, it's really hard for you to be accurate about nutrient density, because here's the deal. Okay, so say you're consuming 3,000 calories of nuts and leafy greens. I watched this vegan one time on YouTube, and I literally cried myself laughing. I almost peed my pants. Seriously. This lady literally ate she ate 17 bunches of romaine for lunch. 17 bunches of romaine. She just sat there and she's like, and I was just like, oh my God, Oh my gosh. So like, yeah, I mean, that's probably like 500 calories of romaine. But did you absorb any of the nutrients from that? Or was your body like, holy crap, what's all this like roughage? You know, like you are a human being, and so you don't have the digestive system to break down such immense amounts of plant food. And so yeah, I mean, calorie dense and nutrient dense is in the food, but what about what your body can actually absorb, break down, and utilize? That's a whole different story. And if you're like creating this big, you know, fibrous poops, that means a lot of that fuel that you ate came out on the other end. That's what's happening. And so that means, like, how did you utilize something if it's coming out in the toilet? You didn't use it. You know what I mean? So that's like my answer for the veganism part. And then for the keto part, you know, it is better. Like, I think the worst thing you could do is intermittent fast, undereat, and be on keto. That's like a recipe for like literally just killing yourself slowly. It is very important to make sure you're eating enough on keto, that's for sure. But at the end of the day, I mean, if you want your liver to be functioning properly, and you have to actually look at how nutrients interact with the organism, not just like nutrients on themselves or humans in themselves, but how do they actually interact with the organism? And if you actually look at cellular metabolism and biology, the body prefers glucose. It is your body's preferred source of fuel. You know, this idea of having the keto flu, and like that is your body literally fighting to the death to try to continue to burn glucose, and you're forcing it into a hypoglycemic state. You're saying drop. You're literally forcing your body's glucose to go so low, and that's why when you first start keto after that first week, all of a sudden your cortisol and your adrenaline kick in, and you're like, wow, I feel so good, like, oh, like you're like overly stimulated, and it's because your body has literally fought you for a week and a half, 2 weeks to stay in that glucose burning state, and it lost because you restricted glucose so hard. And then now stress hormones are kicking in because remember, your cells burn glucose regardless of if you eat it or you make it. Your cells burn glucose. Period. Done. End of story. Like you stop saying your body's burning fat. Like you can. Your body will try not to, but it can. But that doesn't mean that like certain cells in your body, like your brain cells, cannot burn. They have a hard time burning ketones. They have to burn glucose. There are certain cells in your body just must burn glucose. And so it's like you have to understand that when you're restricting that fuel, there is some kind of breakdown that has to happen, some kind of compensation. And then on top of it, like in my opinion, you know, I just see women, like, for example, I had a new client last week who came in, and she was on keto, and even though she was lean, she started getting like horrible cellulite all over her legs, like very dimply, and I'm not saying like cellulite is bad, but I'm saying that that's not normal, right? Like if you saw an animal in nature that like had dimply skin all over the place, you'd be like, that's off, right? And so she realized that what was happening is like her fat was not being burned, her muscle was gone. Like she's burning through lots and lots of muscle first, and like fat is actually hanging around, and fat distribution is like really changing. And so it's like what you have to understand is like weight loss means nothing on keto. It's like, are you actually burning fat, or are you burning muscle, or are you burning tissue? Because I see a lot of like keto nutritionists that are promoting like less than 20 grams of carbs a day and this and that, or less than 50 grams of carbs a day, and they're very lean and they have abs and everything like that, but I look at them and their skin like looks like thin, like sallow, and I'm like, that does not look healthy. Just because someone has abs or is very lean, that doesn't mean you're healthy. And so, you know, honestly, like from a biological perspective, especially as a woman, I just think that, yeah, you can sustain keto for a couple of years without like severe breakdown, but come back to me in 5 years, come back to me in 10 years and tell me where you're at, you know, and that's going to be different for everyone. I'm not like against anything. If you feel great, go keep doing you. If you're ovulating, your temperatures are high, your pulses are good, that is all that matters. I just want you to be at your optimal and feel your best. And see, a lot of women are being told that this is where they should feel their best, but they actually don't feel their best. That's kind of what, like, the point I'm always trying to make is that the body works in a very specific way. And, you know, you can do certain diets all day long, but you're going against your biology. Hi, Jess. I know that every body is very individual and there are many factors, but is there a minimum of calories that you would never recommend dipping below? Honestly, like, I try to make the minimum 2,000 for every girl. It's gonna be it is gonna be different, and I always say, like, you want to intake the right amount of energy. Like, you know, you want your energy intake to reflect your energy output. So there are going to be days, that's why it's like super important to listen to your hunger signals, because it's like there's going to be days where if you're sitting at a desk all day and then you go home to do a Netflix binge, that's going to be a very different calorie intake day than the day that you like went to the zoo to walk around with your family, then came home and like went to the club and like danced for 8 hours, you know, like that's going to be like a very different kind of day. And so, you know, that's why it's so important to eat to appetite. But usually like 1,800 to 2,000 is my minimum. Like, a lot of women come to me and they're eating like 1,100, 1,200, sometimes 900. Like, that's a very common scenario. Women are mostly under eating. They're very rarely overeating. And so I try to like slowly, gradually first get them up to 800, 1,800 and see how they feel. And then they're like, wow, like I feel really good. And I'm like, let's kind of start bumping you up more. Now, at that point, we've really worked on their habits, their lifestyle. You know, we've cleaned up their water. We've gotten them exercising. You know, there's like, we've worked on the things that are going to increase their metabolic rate, as well as slowly up to their calories to the point where they're now metabolizing those calories. So you can't just like stay at 1,200 for 8 years and then bump yourself up to 2,000. You have to slowly do that. But I usually say around 1,800 to 2,000. And then if you're doing any type of intense activity other than walking, like weightlifting, like intense, like hot yoga, any kind of intensity workout, anything, CrossFit, you're probably going to be more like upwards of 2,500 to 3,000 calories. And your needs for carbohydrates will increase for sure. Because remember, like, if you really want to rebuild muscle, you've got to eat to build muscle, girl. What would you reply to them to destroy their argument? To destroy their argument for keto, I would say that when you pee out sugar, you're diagnosed with diabetes. When you pee out fat, you're in ketosis. Because like when you're peeing out sugar, it means you're not using sugar properly. But like when you're peeing out fat, apparently that's a good thing. We'll see. Matt Blackburn explained that insulin resistance was stress plus PUFAs. Yes, it usually is. Stress and polyunsaturated fats drive insulin resistance. That's why I recommend eating very frequently, because you're getting stress hormones really low. Like you know, you're eating a bedtime snack, you're eating you're eating right within an hour of waking, and then you're really focusing an emphasis on saturated fats over polyunsaturated. And usually I can get insulin resistance we can get insulin resistance under control in about like 2 or 3 months or so. I think that everyone should follow a pre-pregnancy program, even if they don't want to get prego, no, to be sure you're always super nourished and prepared. Well, of course, because think about it, your body as a woman is biological purpose, and I'm not saying this is your personal purpose, but your biological purpose is to reproduce. And so the body does want to be equipped with specific nutrients that would be needed to build a baby at all times, because, you know, your body literally is going through this menstrual cycle that is literally preparing. So the first half of your menstrual cycle is preparing for ovulation, and then the last half of the menstrual cycle is preparing to actually make sure that if that egg does get implanted into the uterine lining, that the baby will have everything that it needs. And so it's like this is constantly happening all the way from puberty up until menopause. And so if your body is literally cycling all the time, don't you think that it would make sense that your body wants all the nutrients that it needs to build a baby at all times? Of course. So I think that everyone should be on a pre-pregnancy program. I just think everyone should be fully nourished, meaning that they are continuously nourishing themselves well, like it's their full-time job, and they will see that their body completely shifts, completely change. Could magnesium oil spray be causing really dry, flaky legs? It could, and sometimes, like, if it doesn't itch you, like, sometimes magnesium oil will really itch people, like, it'll give them, like, the itches, and so I usually will recommend, like, applying it with some shea butter or some coconut oil, and that will usually take care of it. It can dry out the skin a little bit. I've been bleeding every couple of weeks in perimenopause. Reason for this and any tips? Yeah, it's low progesterone. So remember that estrogen thickens the uterine lining and can cause a bleed. And then progesterone can be lower during menopause, and that's why a lot of women with whenever they go through menopause, they start to gain weight, is because now there's too much estrogen. Because remember, your tissues make estrogen. Lots of tissues in your body make estrogen, including your fat cells. Whereas, your ovaries are the only one that make progesterone, and then your adrenals and kind of some small amounts. So, I think that it's kind of important to really supplement progesterone once you've gone through menopause. While you're going through perimenopause, it's kind of one of those things where you need to decide for yourself. But remember, when you're going through perimenopause, your cycles will come closer and closer and closer together, and then they will go farther and farther and farther apart. So that's usually like how it goes. Sometimes your cycles will come closer. And I think it's a great idea to track your temperatures while you're in perimenopause, because you can actually see if you're ovulating and you're ovulating like a lot, or if you're having anovulatory bleeds. And that means that that's what's happening, is there's a hormonal like up and down going on. Can I start working with you in 2 to 3 months? Of course you can. All my information for working with me is on my website. I've tried to make it as like streamlined as possible. So you go book that intake session. We're going to spend 90 minutes together combing through your health history. Once you book that intake session, you're going to get your health history. You're going to get a release form to work with me, just to remind you like, hey, I'm not your doctor. You need to still be responsible. And then I look that over. You send me any labs over that you might have gotten, if you want to. That's your choice. And then we just kind of spend 90 minutes just digging through and combing through everything that could be going on. And then I kind of create you a plan, send you notes usually 2 to 3 days later. And then if you need any labs, I try to be very conservative with labs, but I will say sometimes people just need certain labs. And so I'll say okay, I want you to go get this lab done, or ask your doctor for this lab. And then at our next appointment, we'll dig a little deeper. So, my process is I try to make it very streamlined, and I try to I've created it in a way that it works the best for the client. I've worked with a lot of women, and I kind of see how they learn, and I see how they kind of apply things. And so I have kind of designed it to be that way. How can you start losing the weight you gained after keto, but still supporting thyroid? Yeah, so this is going to take actually increasing your metabolic rate. So usually it's going to take time, because remember, when you're during keto, just like when a bear is hibernating in the winter, once they come out of that state, when the bear wakes up and it's it's spring, what does he go do? He is on the search for sugar. He goes and finds bees and eats the honey. He goes and finds berries and eats anything he can get his hands on sugar-wise. He just gorges himself on it. And for that first 2 or 3 weeks, he's insulin resistant AF. He is going to store a lot of that sugar at first. But then he starts to burn it, because the body's okay, now I'm getting an influx of sugar. I got some glucose. I'm going to go back to burning glucose. It's similar to human beings. When you come off of keto, or you've been in a ketogenic state for so long, you're metabolically suppressed. You've told your body to burn fat for how long? So now you're telling the body to burn glucose. It's well, wait, what? So it has to kind of adjust. And so this is why when you're coming off of a low carb diet, you can't just go back to eating 100 grams of carbs a day. I have a very slow process when I take someone off of keto for that very reason. I have them really start with very sweet, ripe fruits, fructose. So a little bit of fruit juices at meals, not very much, 2 to 4 ounces. I have them do some honey, and I have them very relative to where they were at carbohydrate wise. So if they were eating 20 grams of carbs a day, they're not going to go up to 100. They're going to probably go up to maybe 40, 50, 60, and then we're going to go up more, and we're going to slowly change their ratios, their macronutrient ratios. It can sometimes take a while, you guys. I'll be honest, you're metabolically damaged. You've slowed everything down, and so it takes time to get back. But then, hang in there, because once you get back, you can actually burn that fat. All the fat they were trying to force off your body with keto, your body's gonna actually burn it for fuel, and you'll actually stay at a pretty lean weight when you're healed metabolically. That can take a while, I'll be honest, but you'll begin to start to feel better. And that's why I have you focus not just on weight loss, but I have you focus on how you feel in your clothes, how you feel like water retention wise, moods, digestion, just personality. Like, do you feel more outgoing? Do you feel more excited about life? Do you wake up feeling really good? Do you sleep better? Because at the end of the day, I want you reverting back to your childhood where you played hard, you woke up like, I'm ready to go, I'm excited about life, and then the minute you were tired, you hit the sack and you were like, out, so I want you to play hard, sleep hard. That's how we roll here. So that's a healthy metabolism. And so that's the goal, but it does take time to get there, especially if you've been like yo-yo dieting your whole life, under eating your whole life, and then you did like keto, and it just kind of like, your metabolism just like, I'm like slow. Like it's just kind of like crippled a little bit. Can my mom, who's 52 and on a contraceptive implant, use progesterone cream? I answered this in my live yesterday. I'm like a little iffy. Implants are very harsh. I talked about it in my IUD highlight story. Like they're not, they completely shut the cycle down. So I am very like conscious of if you're on something that completely shuts your cycle down, it's kind of up to your discretion to use progesterone cream. I don't see a problem with maybe experimenting with it, but it could maybe confuse the body because you are getting like all these synthetic progestins, which are fake progesterones that aren't similar, like they're similar to progesterone. They're not progesterone. They don't do like the metabolic benefits or anything that actual progesterone does, but they do have like some progesterone type tendencies, and so I don't know how I feel about like supplementing on top of it. How can I identify the cause of stress? Well, you just go through the first main ones. Are you sleeping well? Are you in a stressful relationship? Do you hate your job? Do you come home craving? Are you under eating all day? Meaning that like by the time you get home from work, it's like, let's plow everything into my mouth. I crave everything. I could eat the kitchen sink. If that's the case, like you're under eating. So that's very stressful. So how can you identify the cause of stress? You need to actually be conscious and say like, what is putting my body under stress? Be aware, be in your body. When you come away from an interaction with somebody, are you in a bad mood? Are you is your heart racing? What's going on? So the first really step of identifying the cause of stress is being conscious and in your body, being aware of your body, honoring your body, listening to your body. If you're constantly coming away from certain interactions or your job in a very stressed out state where you're craving lots of sugar, lots of salt, maybe you're feeling like you need to binge, that's stressful, right? Like that is stress. And so I really recommend like really identifying external stressors first, and then you want to like maybe comb through internal stressors. Do you have mercury fillings? Do you have root canals done? Do you have, are you drinking filtered water, or are you drinking tap water with chlorine and fluoride? Are you using a lot of toxic chemicals on the skin or on the body or in your environment? Meaning that, are you cleaning with Lysol and something like that? Remember, spraying that once is literally like smoking 20 cigarettes. So it's like you have to be very conscious of your environment, and part of that is just kind of getting into your body. And then you also want to look at your history. Do you have a history of birth control use? Do you have a heavy history of antibiotic use? Have you like gotten any serious illnesses or hospitalizations or certain surgeries like breast implants? You have to kind of like, that's why I call it like a health history, is you kind of create a timeline. When did you feel your best? When is the last time you can remember feeling like, I feel really good? And then when did that start to really go downhill? When do you remember that? And then, what are your symptoms like? Are they mostly hormonal? Are they mostly gut related? I really recommend, girls, sit down and actually just spend 30 minutes to an hour just writing everything down, everything that you can remember. And I know a lot of women, their consciousness tells them that something was off, so they'll go to the doctor a lot of the times. They'll have a history of like, yeah, I took this one medicine one time and then I felt really off, and so I went to the doctor and the doctor said everything was fine, and I thought that in my gut there was something wrong, but I believed them. And I'm like, write that down. Write that down, write that down. So it's like, I really want you to trust yourself and take a big piece of paper and just write everything down that could be maybe stressing you out. And then interaction wise, like in your current life, like what's really driving stress in your life? Like I find a lot of women that are going through a fertility journey, we can actually pinpoint that their fertility journey is like a huge stressor in their life. Or, we can start to really pinpoint things. So you have to kind of be conscious, and then you have to kind of, really actually go through your life and say, what's causing me stress, whether it's external or internal. How can I watch the live from this one? Like I said at the beginning of this live, guys, I'm sorry I've been behind on posting these. I will be posting them to my YouTube channel tonight. Promise. Does having low insulin, my case, mean it's been high for too long and now it's low? You had pointed this out during our phone call, but I'm not sure what me having low fasting insulin means anymore. It could be a variety of things. Usually when people are under really extreme stress, they can have low insulin levels, which means like that's a bad thing too, right? A lot of times that's actually from the beta cells in the pancreas being damaged. So your body's not pumping out a lot of insulin. And what damages the beta cells? Low progesterone, low T3, and polyunsaturated fats really damage the beta cells. And what regenerates beta cells? Sugar, my friend. That's why they used to have a diabetic treatment that was feeding diabetics 10 tablespoons of sugar per day, and it actually cured their diabetes, but that was in the 1960s, and that is no longer utilized today for whatever reason. Wonder why. How long should it be before I see temp raises since eating protein, carbon, fat, and sugar at each meal? Also, will these heal all the hormone symptoms eventually? Thank you. It kind of depends. I really recommend like sticking to it for 6 weeks to 8 weeks. It's like that is like when you start to see things really like benefit you, but then it really does always take in women usually like that 100 days or 3 months to really see like big changes when it comes to your hormones. Because remember, you have that, I always say, like, remember the 100-day wait. You have 100 days between the time that your dormant ovaries are going to mature all the way to ovulation. It takes 100 days for that journey to happen. And so if you're not healthy, 90 days ago, that process could have been a little bit irked. So you gotta like give it time for sure. You got to give it some time. But like 6 to 8 weeks is usually where like that sweet spot where you really start to see things kicking in. And then that 90-day to 100-day mark, you're like, okay, I'm starting to really feel better. But you should start to see temp raises. I mean, it just depends on your body. But if you're chronically low, then it could take some time. Don't overdrive your self-love. You're doing your best already. We love you. Oh, thank you. Thank you, my friend. Is oil of oregano the same as oregano essential oil? No. Oregano essential oils, you guys, are not safe to take internally. Regardless of what your MLM friend says, talk to a real aromatherapist and they will tell you that they're very contraindicated internally. So an oil of oregano is specifically extracted for consumption, whereas oregano essential oil might not be. So yeah, it's just, I wouldn't take essential oil of oregano myself. Maybe you've answered this before, but does the low-carb diet lower LH? I think I've read that, and I think it's why I'm ovulating much later. Yes, it can. And remember, low-carb diet is stressful on the body, and low carbs do hit a certain peptide in the gut. It's actually a hormone-like peptide that is a signaler to the brain of satiety. So when you're eating a low-carb diet, your brain still thinks you're not satiated. You're not satisfied. And so what can happen is that in the hypothalamus is registering starvation. You're not starving yourself. You're still eating enough, but you're on a keto diet or a low-carb diet, and you're not getting enough carbs for your body to feel satiated. And so when your body's not satiated, why would your body think it's safe for pregnancy? It's not. And so you're going to have a hard time ovulating. So yes, it can definitely be a stressor, especially in that follicular phase. And it can absolutely lower your luteinizing hormone for sure. What are some remedies to get rid of sinus infections? Sinus infections usually happen because people have like a lot of yeast in their sinuses, and then when they like get a cold or they get sick, the drainage is impaired. Your lymph is stagnant, you can't drain, or you have biofilms, which are like these jelly-like structures that yeast build around themselves, stuck in your sinuses. I know it's so gross, but it's also true. So I really recommend like some kind of sinus rinse. There's one called Dave Asprey has a good one. We don't like agree on a lot of stuff, but his sinus rinse is pretty good. And you can just type in a bulletproof sinus rinse, and it's like xylitol and grapefruit seed extract, and you actually suck it up into your sinuses, and it can really help with sinus issues. I also like oregano oil and just general like immune support, and then like mixing some eucalyptus essential oil with coconut oil and like applying it on your chest and on your sinus pathways can be helpful in kind of dilating those sinuses to like help everything drain. And then lymphatic drainage massage is also really, really good. So start on your neck. You want to massage those lymph nodes because your goal is to get everything at the top to like flow down, but you got to start at the bottom to get that going. So you want to like start with your lymph here. You can like YouTube a lymphatic drainage massage, but really you're just draining your sinuses. But that's kind of my favorite ways to go about it. My test shows low estrogen. Yeah, I'd have to see it, like, when it comes to low estrogen, you guys, like, when did you get tested in your cycle? Did you get tested at the right time? Because you have 2 estrogen spikes in your cycle. You don't have estrogen just all the time floating around in your bloodstream. So, estrogen is usually stored in the tissues. So, I don't really care about individual hormones. I always look at the picture of the whole picture because like if somebody has low progesterone or lower progesterone, they're going to have lower estrogen most of the time, or they'll have estrogen dominance. You want to see testosterone, but you also want to see DHEA levels because remember, DHEA is a precursor for estrogen. And then you want to see your stress hormone levels. Where's cortisol at? Where's adrenaline? Where's prolactin? Because those things can suppress sex hormone production. You know, you have to look at everything in a whole, or it's really like it doesn't really give you any information. My goodness, you're an amazing source for PCOS. Thank you so much for these talks. Of course, you guys, I just find it's effective for you guys to like hear each other's questions. Like we do have this really nice community where you guys are really hungry to learn about your bodies. You're not just going for the conventional advice. Like you truly want to feel good and you truly want to see your symptoms go away. And I think that like this is a great way to educate you because I think it's important for you guys to understand why you're applying something to your body, but then also because then you'll be able to apply it. Like it's not just a diet, right? Like it's actually like, wow, like my body's really screaming out for attention. Sorry, low estrogen, but I have high estrogen symptoms. I also have high testosterone, high progesterone. Is this even possible? I'm so confused, but I feel like crap. How did this happen? Where's your liver at? So sometimes when you have high testosterone or high progesterone, it's just because your liver is not getting that out quick enough. And then when it comes to low estrogen, remember girl, estrogen can turn into testosterone and testosterone can turn into estrogen. And that happens in the liver and the gut. And so when you don't have a good liver function or good gut function, sometimes testosterone, like very regularly, we see testosterone turning into estrogen and estrogen turning into testosterone. And so I would probably say that that's what's going on. There's an enzyme in the liver that does that for you, and it's usually because your liver's like not detoxifying well, or the gut's really stressed out. And there's a lot of toxins coming from the gut, lots of pesticides, lots of like hygiene products. Like I'm trying to think through things that could be causing a problem. Depending on what you're eating, like where's the toxins coming in from your food. And then it could just be like lots of pathogens. A lot of people don't realize that like their liver is overburdened because of pathogens. Pathogens create these noxious chemicals and gases that are supposed to be taken care of by the liver. You have a special vein that goes straight from the gut to the liver. It's called the hepatic vein. And the liver's supposed to take care of those toxins. But when the liver's already overburdened with hormones and just like, toxins from the air and the water, and then on top of it, we're like slathering chemicals all over our body, we're breathing in chemicals, like our liver cannot handle this influx of extra toxins coming from the gut as well. And so a lot of times what will happen is they'll go into general circulation, and then that's when inflammation will occur. So I would say that in that case, though, if you have high testosterone and high progesterone, your body's converting testosterone into estrogen. And then your body, like when it comes to high progesterone, it's very like irregular to have high progesterone unless you're taking progesterone or your body just cannot get it out of the body fast enough. That's like what my guess would be. Your thoughts on seaweed extract as an iodine supplement for a cyst on a breast? I think it's worth a try. Iodine can be very effective for fibrocystic breast. You just don't want to go too crazy with it. Too much iodine can cause thyroid problems, but a lot of times like low iodine is what's causing like breast issues and like ovarian cysts and things like that, because iodine does help detoxify estrogen. So what I would do would like maybe put a couple drops like directly on the breast, just rub it in, and just pay attention to any like thyroid like symptoms, because you don't want to overdo it on iodine. Hey Jessica, recently I read some articles about women who got misdiagnosed with PCOS. In fact, they got hypothalamic amenorrhea. What are the difference? This also ties in with these food restrictions. Yes, you're correct. Hypothalamic amenorrhea is very common, and it means that you're not ovulating, and so therefore you don't have a period. And remember that when you don't ovulate, you have polycystic ovaries, or many follicles, because remember, poly means many, cysts mean follicles in the medical literature. I know it's confusing. So many follicles ovarian syndrome, meaning that all that means is when they stick that wand and see that ultrasound, they see many follicles showing up on the ovaries. Why would that happen? Well, remember, before ovulation, there's 8 to 12 follicles racing towards ovulation. That's at all times before ovulation, you will see many follicles racing towards ovulation, because only one's going to make it. But until that one shows up and makes it and ovulates, there's going to be many follicles. And so a lot of times what's happening in hypothalamic amenorrhea is similar. It's an anovulatory problem. You're not ovulating. And why don't we ovulate, you guys? I say this over and over, and I know I sound like a broken record to some of you, but you are not ovulating because the body does not feel safe enough to drop an egg. Your body says, hell no, we're in a stressed out state, there's a famine, there's too many chemicals, there's this, there's that, there's this, and it's not safe for you or baby right now. So we're not gonna even allow the body to make a baby, or mama is gonna suffer. Because remember, you guys, the minute that you get pregnant, your body knows that that baby immediately becomes the priority. The body will do whatever it takes to make sure that baby survives. A lot of people don't realize that your body will pull from your brain, your bones, your muscle tissue. Your body will literally pull whatever it needs, because babies are not made out of thin air. We don't make babies out of thin air, you guys. I know people think like babies just are made out of thin air, but I'm like, no, they're made from nutrients. They're made, with cellular regeneration requires a lot of metabolism. This is happening constantly. When your cells are breaking off and creating new cells, this is a huge deal. This requires a hell of a lot of nutrients. And so you got to make sure that the body is safe enough to reproduce. But all that coming back to hypothalamic amenorrhea is that when you have hypothalamic amenorrhea, the problem is safety. It is not like a lot of times when like you have PCOS, you have multiple hormonal issues, like sometimes low T3, and that's common in hypothalamic amenorrhea too, like low thyroid hormone, but specifically T3. Then we have like high stress, which is common in PCOS, but also in hypothalamic amenorrhea. We have sometimes we have insulin resistance, but usually when you're getting diagnosed with PCOS, you have to have those high androgens. You have to have high androgens or symptoms of high androgens to be diagnosed with PCOS. If you don't have that, that's usually the difference, is that if you only have polycystic ovaries or anovulatory cycles, then you most likely have hypothalamic amenorrhea over PCOS. Doctors are required to have specific criteria to be able to diagnose with PCOS. And one of that criteria is either androgenic symptoms or high androgens showing up on a blood test. So that's the difference. And I think a lot of women who have PCOS actually just have hypothalamic amenorrhea. I've also seen so many women that I personally think got misdiagnosed. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, but we get their stress levels down, we get them ovulating again, we get their T3 levels up, and lo and behold, all their PCOS symptoms are gone, and their doctor's like, wait, I thought you had PCOS. And I'm like, their body was so stressed out. They were eating 800 calories a day. They were over-exercising. They were in a relationship where the guy emotionally abused them. Like, of course their body was stressed out. You know what I mean? So, I think it's really good to know, like, if you're an undereater or an over-exerciser, with hypothalamic amenorrhea, the fix is actually eating more and exercising less. And so a lot of women who think they have PCOS think they need to eat less and exercise more, and they're actually making the problem worse. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, Instagram's about to cut me off. I have like about a minute left. I'm going to go live again, but just so if I get cut off, just join me live again and ask your questions again, so that if I missed some of your questions, I can get to them. Is cellulite on the stomach and thighs related to hormonal imbalances? Yeah. So, I don't want to say, like, make people think that cellulite is bad. Like, having a dimple here and there is just part of life, guys. But if you have, like, cottage cheese all over your legs or all over your stomach, there's probably a fat distribution problem going on, and there can be, like, there's fluid trapped in between the fat cells, and this is usually an estrogen problem. Now, I don't want people, like, sometimes getting rid of this problem can take a while, and if you focus on it, you're going to be miserable. It's more of like a symptom of a problem, but then it's like one thing you want to always say, like, I feel good, so if I'm a little dimply, it's okay. And sometimes, but excessive amounts of cellulite can be a sign that there might be some estrogen issues going on. Society has always been at war with women. I know, it's so unfortunate. It makes me pissed. Is IF bad for men as women? It's not as bad necessarily, but I have seen men that are, like, under intense stress and then they're intermittent fasting and they're just making their situation worse. They're not, like, helping themselves in any way, but I don't think that it's as bad for men as it is for women. Men are a lot more resilient to stress. Okay, I'm gonna stop this and then re-go live. Sorry guys, I'm being cut off. See you in a second.